As a student of literature, the question that you have encountered most often requires you to write a critical appreciation or evaluation of a text. And perhaps you have written a summary instead of presenting a literary analysis. My dear students, let me tell you very clearly and emphatically that a summary is not a critical analysis of a literary piece. If you can give me a little bit of time and patience, I can explain to you how to write a critical analysis of any text that you may have in your syllabi. This formulaic structure is going to help all the students of literature, especially beginners who are in their first or second years of undergraduate level.
Hello, this is Rishikesh, and you are welcome to my channel, Rishikesh Lectures. Education is quintessential for any civilization to sustain its civil sense. Observing the calamitous condition of the education system and realizing the urgency to spread education as far as one can, I have started to lecture on YouTube. As far as authenticity is concerned, I have a first-class master's degree in English literature and I am UGC NET qualified. My lectures are long and detailed as a real classroom lecture should be. Also, most of my lectures are available on YouTube Music as podcasts. And if you like the way I try to educate, consider liking, sharing and subscribing to the channel so that the algorithm gets it to more and more students of literature. With all this being said, let's begin today's lecture.
A critical appreciation is an overall analysis of a text along with your own comments about it. A critical analysis comprises of a study of the background, a conceptual overview of the literary form and movement, an introductory note on the author, a brief synopsis of the text, a detailed explanation of the central ideas found in the text, the literary techniques as well as the structure employed by the author, the writing style, symbolism as well as the significance of the title, the art of characterization, if any, and lastly, critics' comments and your own in the conclusion of the essay. You have to put all of this together in a structure that is efficient as well as comprehensive. So how should you begin and what structure should you follow? With the help of my experience, I am now going to give you the structure that, according to my opinion, is the best in most cases. Most of the students begin with sentences like, "This is a great poem by the great poet," etc. Most of the examiners feel exhausted to see such a repeatedly lame beginning. The interest goes down as soon as one finds the opening sentence being such a boring one. So, what do I suggest? You have two options to begin with. Firstly, the background, and secondly, the genre. If the text is not a straightforward critique of contemporary society, and if the literary form is not a very simple one, begin your answer by defining the genre and explain its characteristics. For example, if you are writing a critical appreciation of Marvel's To His Coy Mistress, begin your answer by defining metaphysical poetry and explaining its characteristics. Sometimes literary genres are related to literary movements too. If that is the case, mention the significance of the movement and then swiftly move on to the next part, which is about the background and the author. The author is a product of his time. So briefly introduce the author, mentioning his full name, years of birth and death, mention his specific traits as a writer, and then move on to explain the literary, social, political, historical, cultural, and economic background of the time that influenced the author. Remember, the background is like the soil, where the author stands as a tree on that soil, and the literary piece is the fruit produced by the tree which is influenced by the soil. That is why background is important. Try to explain the background's influence on the text. Then move on to the next paragraph and write a very brief synopsis of the text. Depending on whether you have written about the author and about the background in separate paragraphs or merged them into one, you have already written 3 or 4 paragraphs by now. And this is the first 1/3 amount of your answer at the most. Next, you should move on to explain all the central ideas or themes that you find in a text. On an average, suppose you have 5 central ideas to discuss. You have to discuss all of them separately, dedicating 1 paragraph for each of the themes. This is a very crucial part of your literary analysis. A central idea is a message underneath the apparent words that constitute a text. It is a message that we are intended to learn from the text. It is, most of the time, an idea that the author is consciously concerned about, and an idea that has made an author write a literary text. Sometimes there are ideas and themes found in a text that are not presented by the author consciously, but they are there as a symptomatic outcome of the author's contemporary social ideologies. Explain all such ideas clearly and substantiate every argument with examples from the text. Suppose you are writing a critical appreciation of Marvel's To His Coy Mistress. One of the themes is the transitoriness of life. You have to explain why the lover speaker in the poem is emphasizing on the shortness of life, and then to substantiate your explanation, you quote from the text, "But at my back I always hear Time's winged chariot hurrying near." That's what you have to do about all the themes found in a text. If there are 5 themes or ideas, you have to write 5 separate paragraphs for them. This is the central part of your answer, and according to the text, this part may be 1/3 or a little more of the total length of your answer. Now you should move on to the rest of the aspects of the text. First, write about the character delineation or the art of characterization in the text, if it has characters. In case of texts which do not have characters, such as lyric poems, you don't have to write about character delineation. But otherwise, you have to point out how well the writer has been in his effort in creating characters. Are the characters round or flat? Are the characters realistic or are they caricatures? Are they heroic characters or anti-heroic characters? Is the author equally able to create characters irrespective of gender? What gender biases can be found through the differences in the creation of male and female and queer characters? These are to be explained in 1 paragraph. Then we move on to point out the different effective literary techniques and elements used by the author. One of the techniques is, of course, the structure of the text. In case of Marvel's Coy Mistress, you point out and explain how effectively Marvel uses the syllogistic structure in the formation of the poem. In case of a novel or play, you talk about how well constructed the plot is. By the way, I must remind you that a plot and a story are 2 different things. And also, among literary techniques and elements comes the author's use of imagery, metaphors, allusions, etc. Especially in case of poems where you don't have a plot structure to explain, you have to explain these techniques in detail. Next, we move on to the style. In case of a narrative, we call it narrative style. In case of poetry, we call it poetic diction. Same thing, it's about the author's writing style. Here, we should write about the point of view, the language, the choice of words, the tone of expression, etc. Does the author use simple or pedantic words? Is the expression emotional or is it logical? Is the author prone towards descriptive writing or towards argumentative writing? Is the tone satiric? Is the text didactic? All these are to be thought of and mentioned accordingly. Next comes symbolism. What is a symbol? A symbol is an image which has an inner meaning in the context of the text. Most of the time, the title of a text carries a symbolic meaning. So first look at the title and explain its symbolic significance, if found any. Repeated images are definitely symbols. So, when studying imagery of a text, always care to note if a particular image is repeatedly presented. Sometimes, beyond these two kinds, there are symbols which can neither found in the title nor in repetition. Remember, a symbol is an image with a deeper or inner meaning, and you shall be able to find them. Explain the symbols within one paragraph. For instance, in Keats's Ode to a Nightingale, the title has nightingale in it. The poem, of course, repeatedly and throughout refers to the nightingale. So the nightingale becomes a symbol of freedom from the bounds of reality, as well as a symbol of eternal joy. That's how you should explain. Now, move on to criticisms and conclusion. I suggest you to try to remember 2 quotes at least from 2 different critics. Even if you can't memorize long sentences, memorize phrases in 4 or 5 words and put them within quotations, within quotation marks, inside a sentence completed by you. For example, suppose I cannot remember what Samuel Johnson said about metaphysical poetry except just a phrase. So, how shall I write? I shall write like this. While commenting about metaphysical conceits, Samuel Johnson quite mockingly wrote that the metaphysical conceits are actually, quotation begins, heterogeneous ideas yoked by violence together, quotation ends, full stop. Okay, so that's how we can include phrases inside our own sentences. After the critic's comments, add your own comments about the text in 2 to 3 lines, and this serves as your conclusion. Especially, I suggest you to comment on the relevance of the text in your age, in your contemporary social conditions. What is the relevance of the text? Explain that. Your critical appreciation is concluded. It is done. And I can say confidently that unless your examiner is an insincere one, your answer is going to be highly appreciated. If this lecture has been helpful to you in any way, consider liking, sharing, subscribing to the channel, and if you please, comment. Thank you.